Whether you're picking and grinning or just grinning, grab a drink, pull up a seat. It's time for Roots Music Rambler. Turn it up. So, Frank, guess what?
What?
So, the Roots Music Rambler is now not only an official member of the Americana Music Association, we are a voting member. In fact, I voted for the most recent board member re-elections or something. But we are now a member of the Americana Music Association, so that's good.
Yeah.
And we did that for a couple of reasons, which I'll get into in a minute. But even better, we no longer have to bite our fingernails about playing other people's music on our show, because we are officially licensed to play music by BMI, by ASCAP, and by CSAC, which are the three primary music licensing association folks for writers and performers and publishers. So we're official. We can play music now. So, and if I were smart, I would have had something queued up to play. But yeah, we can actually play music legally on the show, and we don't have to, pay extra fees or get fined. And now that doesn't mean that some service out there that is distributing our podcast won't mute things or take something down because they don't know that we're licensed, other than we've got it on our website now. But I was pretty tickled that we were able to do that, because that now makes us more official. And most importantly, we are supporting the artists that we play in more ways than just we're trying to promote and publicize their music. We're actually making sure that they get compensated for that music, which is super important for them. So how about them apples? Wow.
Big time, man. What are we in? 5-6 episodes in?
Something like that. Oh, I don't know. I think at the time that we're recording this, I think we're on episode 6.
6 is coming up.
Yeah, 6 is coming up. So, and that's another good, that's another good thing for people to understand about the show. We record, we do new episodes every 2 weeks, but we record maybe a week or two ahead of time. And sometimes we might record 3 or 4, episodes ahead, which means it's been 6 weeks, by the time you hear this or see this. And that's just good to keep in mind, so that if we're talking about something that's timely, for instance, I think a couple episodes ago, I talked about the Jason Isbell, Oliver Anthony controversy. Well, by the time that episode came out, it was 2 weeks old, or maybe even 4 weeks old. But so keep that in mind. We're not trying to break news here on this show or anything. We're actually just trying to explore and have conversations with artists, but we will chime in on things from time to time. We're just, of course, going to lag a little bit. So there you go. Right. Actually, and one other thing that I want to brag about a little bit, about the show. I mean, we are, 6 or so episodes in. I want to encourage everybody out there, especially those of you who listen to podcasts as opposed to watching us on YouTube, and maybe you do both. We hope you do. But if you subscribe to podcasts and you have not yet explored Good Pods, I would encourage you to do so. It is a podcast app. It's also a website. You can go to the website. It's goodpods.com. And the main reason that I want to recommend that you do that is it's kind of a social network around podcasts. It's primarily focused on independent podcasts, which that's us, and we love that. They have other podcasts, so the big podcasts are there too. But one thing that they do regularly there is, within each sort of category and subcategory of podcast, they actually rank the podcast's popularity based on the activity around that particular show on the site. And right out of the gate, 2 or 3 weeks in, Roots Music Rambler suddenly popped up as one of the top 50 music interview podcasts. Well, now fast forward a few more weeks, and I think we are the number 6 music interview podcast amongst the music interview podcasts that are sort of tracked on the site. And we're in the top 25 or top 50 on like 5 or 6 other categories, including being in the top 50 of all music podcasts. And again, it's based on activity on that site, not, Apple and everything else.
Sure.
But we are very appreciative of the recognition and glad that people on Good Pods are enjoying the show. So we wanted to give them a shout out and encourage people to go check out Good Pods, because the more of you go and like our episodes there and all that good stuff, the higher we'll get. Maybe we'll be number 1 one day. That'd be kind of fun. That
would be so cool.
It's neat. I mean, and of course, immediately, because, I'm a ham for all this kind of thing. As soon as I saw that, we threw up Good Pods badges on the website to make sure everybody knew that we were ranked up there. So we wanted to make sure. Heck yeah. We'll put badges of honor on our site. So if you would like to create a top Americana podcast list and rank us up in the tops, we'll put your badge on our website too. Just send it to me. Well, what is it? Ramblers@rootsmusicrambler.com. How about
something like that?
All right. So I guess we got to officially do this. Welcome to Roots Music Rambler. She's Frank.
He's Falls.
And we're rambling on through the stories behind the music we love. What the hell are we doing here today on the show?
Today on the show, Jason, we are talking with John Haywood.
Yes.
And I'm going to let you tell everybody about John Haywood, because you've met him, you've spoken with him. He's one of your homies.
He's one of my homies. That's right. So John Haywood, there's 5 or 6 different ways that I'm connected with John Haywood. First of all, we're both graduates of Morehead State University. Go Eagles. And so that's a big thing. And by the way, there's like this great mountain music and Americana music lineage through Morehead State, which we'll get into over time. But John is a graduate of Morehead State University. He grew up in Prestonsburg, Kentucky, which is about 30 minutes from Pikeville, where I grew up. In fact, Pikeville and Prestonsburg are kind of, for lack of a better term, city rivals in the mountains in like high school sports and things like that. So they're the neighboring town. There's actually 3 of us. There's Pikeville, Prestonsburg, and Paintsville. And if you know anything about where people are from and whatnot, Paintsville is where Tyler Childers would hang out with his buddies and play music. It's where Chris Stapleton's from. It's not too far from where Loretta Lynn and Butcher Holler are. And Crystal Gale, of course.
Yep.
And then Prestonsburg is in Floyd County, which, if you know anything about Dwight Yoakam, you've heard, the song Floyd County. And Dwight is actually from Betsy Lane, which is about a third of the way toward Pikeville from Prestonsburg. So it's the country music highway that goes through there, kind of goes through those 3 towns. But anyway, so John's from Prestonsburg, and I went to see him play his band. He's a banjo. He's an old time mountain arts banjo player, not a bluegrass player necessarily. I talk a little bit about bluegrass in the when we interview him, but it's really more of an old school mountain banjo playing, which he'll explain in the episode is a little different style. But I went to see him play banjo, and he had an art display because he's also a tattoo artist and an artist, like he does paintings and things like that. So, and the reason that I went to that is Karen, my girlfriend, who I think I've mentioned on every show, I think she's keeping track now. I was like, will you please go one show without talking about me? I'm like, nope, I won't do it.
Which is funny because Tom, my husband, is the opposite. He's like, why did it take you 4 episodes to mention who I am?
Well, so now every time I bring up Karen, you can bring up Tom, and it'll be even.
Okay, great.
And maybe we'll spend one episode talking more about Tom, so he feels loved. Anyway,
okay, right, that's all I'm gonna say.
So Karen actually has a John Haywood tattoo. It's on the kind of the crook of her elbow. She's got a skull that he did. And he's a well-known tattoo artist in the region. His tattoo studio was in Whitesburg, which, if you were paying attention about a year or so ago, there were a bunch of floods in Eastern Kentucky. Whitesburg was very hard hit by that, and his tattoo parlor was flooded. So he actually went around and did these like sort of artist in residency, tattoo inkings in different places. And she heard about him, went and got a tattoo. She has a lot of ink. She got one of his tattoos. So she knew him and she knew his art was going to be on display at this event. And so we went to the event and we got to see him play. But that was the event that I talked about a few episodes ago, where I saw Austin
Lucas,
right? And so that was the event where I got to see him, and I met him that night and said, "I'd love to have you on the podcast." The primary reason that I was intrigued by him, not just the art and the tattoo art, and the sort of old time mountain banjo playing. He also, brace yourself, he's the lead singer of a heavy metal band.
That's wild.
So we have an interesting evening in store for you.
Before we kick it all off, though, okay, let's see. We've been going to a lot of shows, all right?
Yes.
So what was your first concert that you ever went to? Not necessarily like in the roots music genre,
right?
But like just the first one you ever went to.
So I'm not 100% sure, because when I was young, my mom and my stepdad would take me to like Renfro Valley and other places where various musicians were playing. I remember the earliest memories I have, other than what I've already talked about, going to the friends' houses on Friday nights. I remember we went to see a folk musician named Cy Khan, who I would love to track down and have on this show, by the way. He's got some really good songs. I think I still have some of my mom's old vinyl Cy Khan albums.
The name sounds familiar.
Yeah. So, I think he was a notable folk artist in the 80s, probably.
Okay.
But anyway, so I know we went to see him. I'm not sure how old I was. I know I saw John Prine probably 3 or 4 times before I turned 10 or 11 years old, because amazing. He was one of my mom and stepdad's favorite. The first concert I remember, like clearly remember, I'm going to a concert. I'm somewhat proud of, but somewhat ashamed of. It was Hank Williams Jr. And I only say I'm somewhat ashamed of it because in retrospect, looking at Hank Williams Jr. in probably, this would have been 1982, maybe. I was 9 or 10 years old when I went to this thing. It was rebel flags and, if the South would have won, we'd have had it made that was a very different era. And I was young and dumb and didn't know any better. And looking back now, it's like, man, he should have been canceled. I think he's evolved and he's changed, and matured over the years. A lot of, I'm not trying to pick on him or anything, but it was a very different era. And looking back on it, I'm like, kind of cringe that was one of my first concerts. But
like you said, that was a long time ago and you were so young. Did you really have a say?
Not really. I mean, I remember I wanted to go because my stepdad had a bunch of his albums and like he was a very popular performer at the time. And so,
of course, and when you're that young, you don't know any different.
That's true. I will tell you that this is one thing that's really cool about that experience. And if I remember to do this, I'll pull this out at some point. My mom and stepdad, my mother was the editor of the local paper in Pikeville, Kentucky when I was that age. My stepdad was like the production manager or something. So that's kind of where they met. Okay. So she had a 35 millimeter. Back then they were just black and white 35 millimeter cameras, or the black film was black and white anyway, because she would take pictures for the newspaper. I had the camera and I think my stepdad put me up on his shoulders. We were in like the 7th or 8th row or something like that. Okay. And I took pictures with this 35 millimeter camera. I have a really good black and white picture of Hank Williams Jr. playing.
Oh, no kidding.
That I took. It was one of the first pictures that I took that was in focus, probably. But I have that in a scrapbook somewhere.
Oh, that's neat.
So I don't have any pictures of me, which makes sense. Like nowadays, I would have done selfies all night. But
oh my gosh.
But back then, I took a picture of Hank Williams Jr. playing. The one thing I remember about that concert was his fiddle player looked a lot like me, had a big beard, was obviously wearing a cowboy hat. And when he was playing or when he wasn't playing, he was like, had this evil grin on his face like the whole time. He freaked me out a little bit. So that was my first concert.
All right.
What was your first concert?
Oh, well, you want to talk about cringe?
Uh-oh.
Actually, no, it's not. Okay, so my first concert, I was like 5. And the only reason I went to the show was, and I know I've mentioned this before, but my father was a Chicago cop. Okay. And like all cops do, they have side jobs.
Okay.
Right. And so for many years, my father's side job, one of his side jobs was with Jam Productions. So he would work like security at, as he called them, rock concerts.
Okay.
And so he was working a rock concert, and the performer was none other than my first love, Andy Gibb. So yeah, true story. So my dad got me and my mom in, and so that I could see Andy Gibb in concert.
Wow.
And I have I have some memories from it, like I remember him being on stage. Like we weren't really close up, but I remember like we were back a little bit enough where like the stadium seating, right? Like I was looking down at the stage a little bit, and he didn't have a shirt on, tight blue jeans. And what I probably just was like so oblivious, I was just happy to be hearing the music and seeing him there. And then what, like 9 years later, he's dead. And I my world was shattered. Yeah. I mean, I hadn't listened to his music, but just like, the memories that I had, especially that concert and just hearing his music. Fun fact, side note, when I was in second grade, you remember the old school, like metal, the lunchboxes?
Yep.
And then it had like, the popular cartoons and whatever, the characters on the lunchbox with the little matching thermos. My lunchbox in second grade was the Bee Gees.
Oh, wow. So you were in deep with the Bee Gees.
I was. And the Gibbs. The Gibbs. Yep. Second grade. I had the Bee Gees lunchbox, and so that was my first concert. I mean, my first like real concert, when my dad didn't have to get me in, and I didn't go with a parent. When I was 13. So my father, because he had that side job, he didn't allow me to go to rock concerts because they smoked dope.
Of course.
And those were his words. And so it's whatever, 1986. 1986 was it? And U2 released the Joshua Tree.
Oh wow, you went to U2.
I went to U2. My godmother, the show was sold out, but where I'm from, everybody's got a guy. So my godmother was able to get me 2 tickets to the show. So I went with a friend of mine. And my mom and my godmother drove us to the stadium and picked us up and stuff. It was a school night. And my father was pissed. He was so mad. He didn't talk to me like the next day or probably the day after too. He was so mad. But whatever. I got to go see U2. That was like my first real concert. And
that's a hell of a feather in your cap to see U2 that early in your Joshua Tree era. That's good. And then, that's big.
Remember a few years ago, they did like the reunion tour, like the anniversary tour for the Joshua Tree. And I was so upset that I didn't get tickets, and I'm not I don't do the aftermarket thing. And then this show too, it was at Soldier Field, and I don't know. That place, it's way too stressful. So anyway, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Go ahead, all you people. You go have fun at this anniversary tour for the Joshua Tree. I went to the original.
Yeah. That's good bragging rights. That's good stuff. I do want to, because you shared the U2 one, I will share this. This is, if you think about our social circles in the late 80s when we were in junior high and high school. And you think about, that was hairband era. So I was trying to be cool. So I loved hairbands. But one of the first concerts that I went to, like with a friend and not a parent, was actually one of the best concerts I've ever been to. And I'm not ashamed at all to admit this. I saw in Rupp Arena in Lexington, Kentucky in 1987, I think it was. It was her first tour as a solo artist, Whitney Houston. And she was absolutely amazing. She came out before she sang a word. She came out and said, guys, I'm going to have to soldier through it tonight. I've got a cold. I'm sick. I have not before nor since ever heard anyone sing better. She was incredible and she was sick. So
I believe it. That was her flu game.
Yeah. The only bad thing about that concert was Kenny G was the opening act.
Snooze fest.
Yeah, I had to kind of go. Although he did do something that was kind of cool. It was in the round, and he actually walked up one aisle to the concourse and walked over a couple of sections and then walked down while playing a solo, which was, at the time was interesting and neat. So it was kind of cool, but I was like, oh, why do we have to listen to the saxophone player? Where's Whitney?
For real. Yeah. Anyway, no thanks. Oh, but Whitney, wow. R.I.P. Yeah. She was so talented.
Yeah, she was amazing. Again, to this day, I've never heard anybody sing that good live or probably on tape.
Yeah.
And I think it was the Super Bowl in 1990 when, unfortunately, Whitney Houston ruined the national anthem for all of us. Because since that time, everyone who's ever tried to sing it has tried to sing it like her, and no one can.
No one ever will.
Stop it. Just stop it. So anyway, all right. One other thing before we jump to break, because we want to bring John Haywood on here to talk to him. I did want to give everybody a couple of cool updates. We are, working hard to try to get, different guests and whatnot on the show. And I happen to have, and I've said before on the show, I work in the marketing world, and I have been invited to speak at an event. It's in the United Arab Emirates. So I'm going to Abu Dhabi in a couple of days from the time when we're filming this. But I decided that, true to the DNA of this show, while I'm there, I'm going to explore the roots music of the United Arab Emirates, the Arab world. And knock on wood, I hope this works out, because everything so far seems to be on pace for it. But I have booked for an interview Mohammed Dohai. While I'm there, I'm going to interview him in person, and he is an oud instrumentalist. An oud is like an oversized lute, kind of predecessor to the guitar, if you will. And it's an Arabic instrument that if you saw it, you would probably say, oh, yeah, I've seen that in movies or something before.
Yeah.
But he is like the Ricky Skaggs of the United Arab Emirates. Like, he is a, concert performer.
He's the guy
in the oud. He's the guy. So he has agreed. He did say ahead of time, my English isn't very good. We may need to translate and overdub. I said, you know what? I'm going to be honored to be in the room with you. I don't care what we have to do.
Sure.
But we're going to explore a little roots music around the world. So I'm really excited about that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. And, when Roots Music Rambler was first born, that was like part of the reason why, shortly after launching it, I went to Ireland for Tradfest, and that was, discovering the roots of, traditional Irish music, which is what kind of helped create country music today as we know it, So that's awesome. I'm really excited about that.
I am too. And I'm just hoping that it'll work out, because I only have one day while I'm in the country that I can do this, and he is available. And I think he's a little nervous about doing the interview, because he did say his English isn't great. Although I've seen some interviews that he's done before, and his English sounds perfectly fine to me. but I'm working through it with him to make sure that we get it done. Hopefully we will, and I'll have a good interview to bring back to you when I come back from across the planet. So that's gonna be fun. All right, we're sipping on a bourbon, and obviously I'm about out here, so we're going to take a quick break for a refill. Take a moment, if you will, and listen to more about the awesome sponsors that help make the show happen, including, our favorite, our Muskox flannels. They are buttery soft, built like a tank, just like me.
And so, Michigan State alums, just like me.
That's right. The man behind them, or one of the main guys behind it, is a Michigan State alum. So if that matters to you, which it shouldn't, but if it does, there it goes. And this is kind of green. It's sort of Michigan.
Well, no, go green. That's what we Spartans say to one another.
Well, okay, you can do that. But anyway, it's gomuskox.com /Rambler and use the code Rambler to get a discount and get yourself some badass, kick-ass, buttery soft, built like a tank flannels. Go muskox.com /Rambler. Use the code Rambler. This is Roots Music Rambler. That is Take Me Back to East Kentucky. There you go. John Haywood on the banjo and vocals there. That's from his album Upon My Word and Honor, which is available on the iTunes and all that good stuff. And he joins us now on Roots Music Rambler. John, welcome to the show. I understand you just got off of somebody's arm or leg or back or something at the tattoo parlor, did you not?
Yeah, I did a full outer forearm this evening.
Very good.
On a young lady. It was her second tattoo and an addition to what she already got. So she's working on getting covered.
Very good. Yeah. Well, she's well on her way, I'm sure. So before we get into the music and whatnot, I think it's fair for everybody to know and for you to be able to tell everyone your full-time gig is a tattoo artist. You've got a tattoo parlor there in I believe Whitesburg, Kentucky. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's where I'm sitting at now. Working on my 20th year in the business.
Wow, 20 years of tatting. Did you think when you were growing up in, I think, Prestonsburg, you'd ever be doing 20 years worth of tattoos in Eastern Kentucky?
I should have known. I should have known. I did my first one when I was 13. I got my first one when I was 13.
Okay. Okay.
Wow.
How illegal was that?
I don't know. We were doing illegal things.
It is Eastern Kentucky.
I had a friend whose older brother knew how to do stick and poke tattoos, and he taught us all how. And we went to their house. You could get away with about anything at their house. Stuff you couldn't get away with.
That sounds really unpleasant. Stick and poke, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So I full disclosure, I have 0 tattoos. So I have no idea what it feels like, but stick and poke, that's not something I think I'd like to experience.
No, you do it we did this one with it was needle, and we did it with needle and thread and India ink, all of which I stole from school.
This story just keeps getting better.
I love it.
Thread.
It's mostly legal, is what he's saying.
Yeah, mostly legal. Yeah, we weren't.
Okay. Can I ask about like I imagine you use your dominant hand most of the time. Do you have carpal tunnel?
Currently no. Knock on the desk here.
Okay.
I do yoga and stuff, and the yoga I do right now, the type of yoga I do, always has these wrist warm ups.
Oh.
And I've always tried. I skateboard on and off too, and It's been a long time since I skateboarded because I'm always worried about like my wrists and stuff like that. Skateboarding injuries.
I can imagine.
I've known a lot of folks have wrist problems from tattooing, especially after almost after 20 years of doing it.
Sure. When you said you've been doing this for 20 years, that was the first thought that I had. Yeah. Like, oh my goodness, he must have carpal tunnel.
So far, I'm still okay. Maybe playing music helps a little bit. Maybe it's not. Certain things aren't as repetitive as you may think they are. They're it's very varied. It's almost like doing exercise with your hands too. The way you have to hold the skin with one hand, and certainly you got to hold the machine with the other hand. And I'm an old school tattooer. I still use the old coil machines. That's my favorite. Just like old instruments are my
favorite. Nice.
Something you can work on. I like old cars too. Something you can just kind of get in there and figure out how it works. And once you really learn how it works, then you can make certain things do whatever you want.
That's great. Well, I mean, I've got a couple of tattoos, and I know you're a well-respected tattoo artist throughout the region. We're both in Kentucky, obviously, and so I know people who have your art on their arm. In fact, Karen, my girlfriend, has one of your tattoos on her elbow. I think it is roughly forearm and elbow. But I don't know that if I walked into a tattoo parlor anywhere and someone said, "Oh, I use the old-fashioned coil machines. I like old stuff," I'm not sure I'd have a lot of confidence in them.
Well, it's probably clean, Jason.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, this is what powers it, Gotcha. There's a lot to go into it, but I compare it to music every day. I compare tattooing to playing music. There's a lot of different styles of tattooing, a lot of different philosophies and technical abilities, specifications, and all that sort of stuff. Just like music, and
nice.
I make a lot of comparisons, and even learning
that's good because it helps us.
The technique is like learning an instrument. And you're always kind of getting better at it. You're always kind of getting to where it feels more and more natural. Therefore, you can do more things. You can experiment sometimes, or you can. Sometimes you're just sticking with the tried and true thing. People get there's a lot of repetition in tattoos. Mm-hmm. A lot of repetition in music.
That's true. Especially I know there's a lot of repetition in bluegrass music, and that's something that you play. You do play the banjo. Now, I want to drop another sort of, you probably didn't expect this one coming for the audience out there. Not only is John a tattoo artist, not only does he play the banjo and play bluegrass music and traditional mountain music, but you're also the lead singer of a heavy metal band.
Yeah. Heavy metal was a big part of me wanting to play music when I was a younger kid. But being where I was from, there's a deep traditional music heritage around here. And in order to get to the heavy metal, they made me go through that. It's like you have to trench through the weeds of, learning to play tunes like John Henry and Cripple Creek and all that sort of stuff. The stuff as a young kid, you're not hearing this stuff on the radio. So why, this is the old dude's music. So like you hear it all the time to the point where you're sick of it. But now that, in order to get my first actual guitar kind of teacher person was my cousin up the road who worked for the railroad. And he really had a funky method of tuning the guitar, but he would get my guitar in tune for me, but he played bluegrass music. And hell, my family, I come from my grandfather's old regular Baptist. They didn't even believe in musical instruments in the church, in the church and all that sort of stuff. But, I kept a lot of that sort of sad, that minor key singing, in my head throughout growing up. I used to impersonate my grandfather and what he would say and what he would sing, even though I didn't know the words. Like, well, the Banjo album, Upon My Word and Honor, came from something my papa said growing up that I never could understand growing up. Growing up for years and years and years, it would sound like he would say, "Plumb my word noggin." And I was be like, and he would say that to stuff that he was just like, "Lord, son, what are you doing?" Be like, "Plumb my word noggin," And then and then I realized as I got older, it's like, what was he even saying? And he was saying, upon my word noggin. He was saying that. So, that's sort of that saying for me is kind of represents my relationship with sort of the old ways of just not even kind of hearing it, not understanding it at first, and then later really sorting to understand it and appreciate it. And and I think those old minor keys, you find that in heavy metal all the time. So
it's true.
If you say so.
I mean,
I wouldn't know any different.
But now that most of the old time music that I'm really inspired by, I said old time music, so bluegrass, something that technically came later than old time music. My banjo expertise is not in Earl Scruggs, JD Crowe, or Ralph Stanley, or any of that. If you're thinking of me as the banjo player, that's not who I am. Banjo playing for me was a way to get away from rock and roll for a while and really explore, this old music that I'd kind of heard growing up and really sort of see what it is. And that's when I started making the musical connections to the old stuff, that old stuff in heavy metal that I didn't notice when I was a kid because I was too busy paying attention to the distortion and and the amps and like I see Master of Puppets, that was like a life changing album for me as a little kid. I see that the poster, back there. I I had a Poison tape, and I traded my friend a Poison tape for a Metallica Master of Puppets tape because I seen some kids wearing the T-shirts on the playground. And this was like '86 or '87 or something like that.
Yep.
And I took it home and I put it in, and that acoustical intro to the song Battery was just so scary sounding. And then when it kicked in, I traded my Poison. Look for the something what the cat dragged in or something like that.
Yeah,
it scared me for a minute. I had to take the tape out because I was just like, "What kind of music is this?" And then it was all it's like drinking. It's like reminded me of when I started drinking black coffee. It's like, what is this? And then now it's just like stuck.
Nice.
You make the best comparisons, truly.
Very good. So I want you to make some more comparisons here because I really want people to understand the difference between, because you touched on, your your banjo playing is not, Earl Scruggs. It's not bluegrass music. It's mountain music or old time music. What's the difference between the two? How can you describe what you play versus what typical people understand as bluegrass banjo so that they understand the difference?
Well, it's much older. It's very much rooted in the old African styles, actually. A downstroke style of playing, kind of inherited through oral traditions and mixed living situations in the mountains before the Civil War and then after. And these old traditions are associated with dance, like the square dance. A lot of folks don't, they think about these songs as being like these old songs, these old Appalachian songs that they can trace back to Ireland and all that. But for years, there was an African element and even other what you would consider minority elements that were present in the music, Native American elements present in Appalachian music, especially before and after the Civil War, right up until the 1900s. And so that the music that I like, that I'm interested in, and I got interested in because it was sort of it gave Eastern Kentucky, it gave myself, my home, a place. It made me feel like Eastern Kentucky, when I was growing up, felt like a no man's land. It felt like a wasteland. Like, why would you want to be here? Why, there's no opportunity. There's still not many opportunities here. Yep. But discovering the importance of the old time music and the effects that it had on the world at large, especially because it stayed preserved in the mountains longer than anywhere else, and it started getting noticed at the times of the first recordings and things like that. And then that's when, I guess you could describe it stylistically. We call it overhand banjo, which is like, instead of, it's like, boom, chicka-ding, 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 chicka-ding. It's kind of like that. You're kind of like hitting down with your finger and popping the thumb string. And that's kind of the basics of it. And then there's a few little old-timey, 2-finger, old-timey 3-finger, but it's not based on real fast playing. It's not based on, it's very informal. It's centered around dance and storytelling. The old ballads about things that happen. And as a musician, it's musically fun. It's musically an enjoying thing to do, because when you're in heavy metal, when you're playing in bands, and then I've played in metal, punk rock, all that, you are kind of you're having to write your own songs, put out albums, all that sort of stuff. So the old time music was kind of refreshing for me because you're just kind of learning these songs and you're learning these ways to play the banjo. You're not so much throwing having to spend a lot of your creativity. Well, you are putting your creativity into it, but it just sort of opened up a different idea of music for me, a different way of playing music. Where it's like you learn the song, but you make the song yours.
Gotcha. Very cool. Well, as we go to break here, I want to play a little bit more of your banjo music. And then when we come back, brace yourself, because I may come back from break with a little Appalachian, which is very different. But stick around here on Roots Music Rambler. We're talking to John Haywood, plays banjo, plays heavy metal, does tattoos, apparently skates, does yoga, and he's one of my homies from Eastern Kentucky. So try that shit on, people. Stick around for just a second. This is Roots Music Rambler, and here's Cumberland Gap from Upon My Word and Honor. You can just kind of hear the storytelling in the music there. That's pretty cool. That's Jay Gould's daughter from Upon My Word and Honor, John Haywood. Old time banjo extraordinaire maestro here joining us on Reach Music Rambler. And John, before the break, we were kind of talking about, the differences between the type of banjo you play and the type of banjo that a lot of people are used to from bluegrass music. And then you talked a little bit about, how banjo was a little bit of a break from what you grew up with. You and I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, probably about 30 miles apart. I grew up in Pikeville. You grew up in Prestonsburg, I believe. And so I'm very familiar with the environment back then in the, 80s, late 70s, early 80s into the 90s. But tell people the variety, the polar differences between the music that we grew up with and listened to in Eastern Kentucky, because I think a lot of people think rural America and automatically think country, and they don't really understand that there's a wide variety. Especially, we didn't grow up in the dark ages. We grew up in the 80s and 90s. So there was a lot out there. So tell people a little bit more about the musical influences you had growing up when you started listening to music.
Well, I immediately think about my dad's record collection and this little box of 8 tracks that he had.
Yes, 8 tracks.
And, and that record collection has become it was the start. I didn't know this as a kid, but, as I got older, my dad, just gave me those records, and then I've just built on to it. So, stuff that my dad was listening to, within, the 8 tracks, would be like Led Zeppelin, AC/DC. Let's see, what else did he have in there? ZZ Top, what else? The Beatles, Rolling Stones. That was in Dad's record collection. Let's see, The Who.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think, and I was born in 77, and at some point or another, they quit. Dad started buying tapes and stuff like that. So they were Fleetwood Mac, of course. Rush.
Good classic rock tunes. It's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah, there were Rush in there, and I remember Dad, he had a Jimi Hendrix 8-track. Our double wide at the time had a built-in 8-track into the wall of the house, and the speakers in the ceiling. And so my aunt next door, my sis, as we called her, she was my mom's sister. She had a little 8-track player in her little Toyota, and she liked Hank Williams Jr. and Waylon Jennings and all that stuff. My granny liked Waylon Jennings and.
Well, I hate to interrupt you here, but Granny's in Eastern Kentucky. I know for sure she liked Conway Twitty.
Yeah, she liked Conway Twitty, and then her favorite though was Merle Haggard.
Oh yeah,
Merle Haggard was her number one favorite, and I have a record in my collection that's which Merle Haggard record it is, but he's young and shaven in it,
Wow.
She wrote Lucille right on his face. That's her name, Lucille.
That's how you did it back then. You didn't think of albums or anything as collector's items. Yeah. You thought of them as your possessions, and you had to put stickers or write your name on it or something in case somebody stole it or lost it or whatever. So that's true. I remember that. I had a, both a cassette collection, and then I probably was in high school, I guess, when CDs started to come out, and I had stickers that I put on the interior case of my CDs with my name and number on it, in case anybody, if I'd left them somewhere and they were found, they could call me. So that's how we used to keep track of that shit back before it was all MP3 files.
Yeah. So there's a lot of early musical influence. I lived in a holler surrounded by family, so up the holler was I had older cousins, and I remember going to his skating party, and for a birthday party, we'd rent out the Archer roller rink, and we listened to Cinderella, and I forget what Cinderella album it was, and then we listened to Beastie Boys' License to Ill.
Yep. And
to me, listening to Beastie Boys, that was it for me, and then it was Run DMC, and me and my cousin Nut, God rest his soul, when we were young and listening to rap, decided we were going to start a rap group. And we just took a little tape deck out behind the house. We were the kids that got home from school, at like a certain time. And then it was hours before our parents got home.
Yep.
So we would sit out and just rap. We didn't really understand rapping. We would just make up shit off the top of our heads, about kids at school that we didn't like, who, either had picked on us, who we wish we could kick their ass or something like that. And I'll never forget trying to use one of my dad's records. I went through the records and tried to find one that, like, maybe I could put on a turntable and learn how to, like, do the little
scratch
stuff.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it. I didn't understand it. At the time, I was like, what makes it do that? What makes it? So I just did a rap, and I took the needle, and I went back and forth on the record like that with the needle.
Oh, no.
And I started rapping about this kid. I was going to kick his ass at school. I was doing
that. Oh, I'm getting choked up because it's bringing back memories.
Is there any? Are there any recordings of this still in existence?
No. Well, so there was. Here was the thing about it. So the tape goes into the tape basket, and years later we discovered, the big discovery for me of rock and roll was Appetite for Destruction, and I found out about Appetite for Destruction because we would ride the school bus in the morning, and the school bus driver had a tape deck, and he would play whatever tape somebody would give him at the time. And
wow,
and that's cool.
Well, first before Appetite, it was AC/DC, Back in Black, and because they would play that every single day. We listened to the Black in Black album going to school on the school bus. And this is Hollers in Eastern Kentucky. This isn't like, and before long, everybody's singing along to the songs and stuff, and especially, Shook Me All Night Long. It was like, and then from there, and I'll never forget when Appetite for Destruction came out, that somebody brought that tape on the bus, and we jammed out Appetite for Destruction going to school, even with the fuck offs and all that. The bus drivers didn't care.
Prestonsburg and Floyd County had way cooler bus drivers than Pikeville did, by God. I'll tell you that. My God.
Yeah, the old dude's name was Glenn, and he was losing his hair and his teeth. I remember he smoked Camel non-filters. He'd stand up there and smoke his Camel non-filters when he dropped off.
Rough.
And just as long as we was, whatever. And speaking of, and it's funny, the stuff, the bus, what it exposed me to. And these were like holler kids. It was the next big thing I got exposed to on the bus was this kid gave me a VHS that said Metallica, Cliff 'em All.
There you go.
And I still have that to this day. That goes anywhere I go. My Metallica, Cliff 'em All VHS. It stays,
Yeah, for you kids out there, we used to have to go to a store if we wanted to watch a movie, and they had the movies up on the wall, and you picked one, and you hoped that there was a full container with a VHS cartridge behind the movie box, because if it didn't, they were out and you couldn't watch that. And then you had to take it home and put it in a machine and hit play. Oh, and then you had to rewind it before you took it back, or they charged you $1.
Please be kind, rewind.
My granny, we'd go stay with my granny. Both my parents worked as I was a kid, and my granny would watch us during the day. I remember we rented a VHS. You could rent the player, actually. Mm-hmm. And the number one movie I rented was fucking Star Wars.
Yep. Oh, man, that's awesome. And just so John said a couple things here that I want to go back and clarify, make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. When he talks about a skating party, he's talking roller skating.
Roller skating. Yeah.
Not skateboarding, not inline skating, roller skating. That was big in the 80s in Eastern Kentucky. And then he also said I think he said Sis had a built-in 8-track in her double wide. Just for you guys that don't understand.
We had the 8-track in our double wide. She had an 8-track in her old little Toyota.
Okay, she had the Toyota
car
so,
she had.
So you had the 8-track in the double wide. Just so people know, to be precise, a double wide is a double wide trailer, right? So for those of you city folk who don't know what double wides are, they're double wide trailers.
Some of us city folk know what that means, okay?
Oh man, this is so much fun. So much fun. All right. So I'm gonna go to break one more time, then we're gonna come back and talk about a couple other things here with John Haywood. But I want everybody to buckle up and brace yourself, because as we talked about, John's also lead singer guitarist for Appalachian, which is a heavy metal band. So we've been listening to his banjo music to now, but now we're getting ready to hear something a little different. So stay tuned. This is Roots Music Rambler, and brace yourself. This is called Black Jack Chevy. Your ears are not deceiving you, folks. This is Roots Music Rambler. We're just playing a little Old Joe from Appalachian. That is the heavy metal band, the version of John Haywood's music that we've been talking about here on the show. John also is an accomplished old school, old time mountain banjo player, a tattoo artist, and all that good stuff. And John, we've been talking a lot about musical influences and whatnot. Tell me a little bit more about your family. You said you grew up in a holler. You had a holler full of family members, which is generally how that works in Eastern Kentucky. How prevalent was playing music in your family? Are you an outlier, or was it something that everybody did?
So imagine it was more like the best comparison I have is to Luke Skywalker learning about Jedi Knights.
Okay,
it was like like I said, we were old regular Baptists, and there wasn't a lot of people that played music in my family, but I had to discover that there had been by going. I found a fiddle, an auto harp, and a guitar in the old home place attic. And then I found photos that showed folks in my family, at some point in time playing music. The auto harp was my grandmother's, and she apparently played the guitar. She died in 1975 before I was born. 2 years before I was born, she passed away, and it was so hard on my papa that he really quit drinking and quit, swarping and all that, and joined the old regular Baptist church. So, I was born in 1977, and at that point in time, that was, if I went to church, that was where I went to church. It was the old regular Baptist. And,
sure. So because the old regular Baptists were sort of anti-music, was music for you something was it a rebellion, an act of rebellion, or was it something you just snuck and did?
Was it like Footloose?
It was kind of an act of rebellion because it took a long time before I could convince anybody to give me a musical instrument. I was real fascinated, like I said, with those old instruments in the attic. And then one day my mom, it was interesting, one day, this is about the time I had been kind of begging around for instruments. She buys a keyboard, like a little keyboard that's kind of like a toy, but it teaches you to play songs.
Okay.
And I can still play all these little songs that I learned off that keyboard to this day. You know, all these little, you know, Christmas songs, the birthday songs, and, you know, all those little, and you learn them one finger, because I can't do two hands on a keyboard at all. But you had to learn them, you learned them one finger. And then she bought a nicer one that had a little book, and you know, we messed around with that. And I begged and begged for a guitar because a friend of mine had an electric guitar with an amplifier, and I was like, "Oh, that's how they get that sound." You know, that's how it. And I begged and begged, and finally, when I was about for Christmas, I'd played my friends, you know, whenever I go down out with him, but for Christmas of my turning, how old was I? I was like turning 12 or something like that. I got a guitar for Christmas.
Nice.
And it was just downhill after
that. So how did you learn the banjo?
The banjo was something I kind of started exploring later. When I had, once I got off to college, had a few unsuccessful rock and roll bands, and I was an art student at University of Louisville. I had an undergraduate from Moorhead and was a graphic designer, and I didn't like all the computer work and stuff. So I decided to do we moved to the Louisville area by random chance. My wife, Kelly, got a job teaching out there, near Louisville, out in Henry County, out in the country.
Yep.
And we lived out there in a little trailer park out in Oldham County. And I went back to school, decided I would just get my master's and focus on trying to get away from the computer. So yeah, while in Louisville or whatever, I started getting homesick and stuff like that. After all the bands started failing, I always wanted music in my life. Whether I pursue it or, you know, put out an album or whatever, you know, I wanted music in my life. And the banjo was more of a reconnecting to who I was, because at U of L, I had to do a thesis as a graduate student. And as an artist living in the city, I didn't have the same backstory as most of the people there. And I had more of, you know, when they're talking about, you know, where they came from, their lives and all that sort of stuff, you know, I was an alien there, totally. Yeah. What made me an alien in Louisville was just the fact that I came from it was kind of like a different planet, so to speak. Not to, you know, keep comparing stuff, you know, like sci-fi movies and Star Wars, but you have to understand, I grew up, that's my entire childhood.
Yeah.
And
same.
So yeah, and then that led to a connection to the banjo. I discovered banjo players like Roscoe Holcomb and Lee Sexton. Lee Sexton, I eventually got to be in his playing the band with him and be his number one guy to call in his later years. And that Cumberland Gap you played earlier, that I learned that from him. That was his unique way of playing Cumberland Gap. And in his later years, you know, I sort of promised him that I would carry on his style of banjo playing.
Nice.
Because really it is a dying art here in the mountains, and not many folks do it or even know what it is.
Yeah.
When you're talking about it anymore, and it's kind of sad. So I try to keep it going, and that was really a big attraction to it, that it was different than bluegrass banjo, that it was great banjo playing for sitting alone on the porch or, you know, drinking coffee in the morning or winding down after work, or hell, even I got so into banjo playing, it went with me everywhere. Like it was in the car, and I'd be at the tattoo shop, and in between tattoos. Like if I had like 45 minutes or even 15 minutes to kill, it'd be like Banjo out of the case. You know.
Wow.
Especially if I was there by myself.
Well, sure.
I worked when I first started tattooing. I was tattooing at Big Daddy's Tattoo and on Dixie Highway around Radcliffe, Kentucky. And you would have the busiest days in the world, and then you would have what felt like the slowest. It was like,
yep,
nothing's happening in here today, but you know, still be open for that. Maybe that late night straggler that wants such and such's name on his chest, and I'd have the banjo in the back. I'd be back there going to town. And
there you go. Gives you
a good opportunity to practice. Have you done any banjo tattoos?
Oh, tons. It's almost like someone wants a tattoo of a banjo or a banjo player. It's almost like I'm the guy now. Well, because I also did a lot of art of banjo players. That also became, I don't know if I'm an obsessive compulsive type person or not, but I tend to go really all in on the things that I do, and you kind of have to, I guess, if you're going to make a living at it. Be it tattooing, music,
for sure.
But I don't know what I was getting at. We can back up and scratch that.
Banjo tattoos.
Yeah. Well, I get all obsessed with it. Not only was I obsessed with playing the banjo, but I wanted to explore it in terms of artwork as well.
Okay.
Because not only am I, as a musician, interested in the playing, the techniques, the whatever, but the story, the history, the songs have histories behind them. Even the techniques have histories behind them. My number one mentor, who I lived next to for 7 years at the head of the creek over on Little Devils, was George Gibson. And he's kind of a banjo historian. You can look him up. And he describes remembering as a young boy in the late 50s when he started learning to play, that banjo styles were as different as just accents from one holler to the next. And he could remember some of it because what happened with bluegrass is Earl Scruggs, and this is how people kind of forgot about old time music was. Earl Scruggs came along, and everybody wanted to learn to play like him. He was one of the first recorded banjo players that was, when 78s and all that stuff was being marketed. And the goal of those 78s, the goal of those recording companies was to record our music and then kind of sell it back to us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of that's the beginning of a really cool influence that our culture had on the world, but it's also the beginning of a very bad trend of people feeding us our culture back to us in a false way, that we latch on to this false identity that just grows and grows and grows and grows over the years and through generations. That's really not what being, what something even was to begin with.
Interesting. So I'm curious, you've got, obviously the pursuit of preserving the somewhat dying art of old time banjo playing. You've obviously got your, heavy metal band, and I'm sure other musical interests too. And you've got your tattoo art, and you've got art too. Cause when I first met you, you were actually performing that night. You were performing banjo, but it was a combination sort of, art gallery display of your artwork, which is not just tattoo art. It's also, art that you would buy and hang on the wall. I'm curious, what motivates you in maybe across all of those things? Is it, I want to earn a living? Is it, I want to express my creative vision? Is there something that sort of ties all that together for you?
It has to be a little bit of all of it, you have a family to support. I've worked plenty of shitty jobs before I got into the tattoo business. The tattoo world is kind of the anchor. And when you first start as a tattooer, you got to go all in. And when I was first as a tattooer, I didn't have, like I said, I brought the banjo with me and I only played it at work. I wasn't doing shows. I wasn't doing anything that really could take me away from being at the shop, because I wanted to establish some way of being able to support myself. Mm-hmm. Or else, what we all do, we all have to do that. So we all have to, and I explored so many different ways of making, how I could make artwork as a living. My number one route, so you got to have like I don't know what you call it, like something that's like I went to so many different churches, and so this one church described it as and I don't go to church anymore. But I remember one church describing it's like a core value,
Yep.
And you have a core value sort of that drives everything in a way. And then you have all these other things that are forever sort of like in motion and changing, you're always adjusting and trying to look at the world through a different light or whatever. But my papa, I've talked about my papa a lot because he had a really big hand in raising me as a kid. And he was a coal miner. He quit school in the 6th grade, to work in a coal mine.
Wow.
And if you got kids, that's kind of like, what, like, what kind of world was that,
It was a different one.
Yeah. And so, yeah, he told me one day when I was, I guess, what you would call coming of age, the times. He kind of taught me how to, like, earn some money, like grass cutting. That was a big thing. Cut grass for my papa, and he let me use some stuff to go cut someone else's grass, but he told me, he had black lung and all that. He said, "Now, John," he said, "if there's one thing you need to remember in life is this: they can take, if you chase a job, they can take it away from you. They can take your job. They can take, your home. They can take whatever. There's if you can learn to do something that you love and be good at it, and focus on that over profits, over anything else, and meaning just sort of keeping it, alive, I guess. He was like, then they can't take that from you. That's right. If there's one thing they can't take, it's that. It's your drive to, for knowledge. And he said this to me, and it changes. My interpretation, just like upon my word and honor, what it means changes for me as I get older.
Sure,
and have more life experiences and all that sort of stuff. And it really, and I've always thought about what it meant. And when I was young, it meant go to college and get an education, because that is a very important thing to have, because he missed out on one.
Yeah. And
because he missed out on one, he worked like a dog, from the time he was a little kid. I'm proud to say my papa was he was a big, he was a UMWA member, United Mine Workers Association, a big union organizer. I learned. What's interesting. If I learn new stuff about him all the time, and he's been gone quite a while, and that was something I learned just recently. Like I had this belt buckle, his union belt buckles, and a lot of his old stuff after he passed away, but I didn't understand until talking to another friend of mine that I grew up with, but he had kind of a different family that lived in the area. told me some stories about him and stuff. And so that to me is that's I think that's a nice driving force to have in life. And I've worked so many other shitty jobs. I pumped gas, I flipped burgers, I put up with little kids. Oh my, that's the worst. That's the most horrible thing on the planet. That was when, I tried to quit tattooing and have a normal job. When I moved back to Eastern Kentucky, I tried to have a normal job, and I took this little teaching position, and I ended up having to teach art to K all the way to 12. And it was the biggest nightmare in my life. And
I would imagine that's a big array of people to have to figure out.
Seriously, K through 12, yikes.
So I was like, I'm not going to live like this. No way. I'm gonna, I'd already been through however many years working at Big Daddy's. I realized I knew everything I needed to know to go back to tattooing, and I just needed a place. I still had a lot of my old equipment, and I just needed a spot, and so that's what I did. That 1 year of teaching, put it in perspective. Put a lot of what my grandfather said back into perspective. Is like, is a steady paycheck worth the misery? And for me, it's just like, I don't know where the drive came from. Maybe it's what he said all these years, because I see a lot of folks, a lot of friends and folks, who could probably do just what I'm doing, but who kind of hung up the pursuit for a more, secure life, I guess.
Sure.
Or, stuff happens, not everybody, a lot of my friends, some of my friends had kids when they were young, and what are you going to do, then? It made it hard for a lot of my friends to be able to say, go on the road and play music.
Yeah.
Being a serious.
Sometimes life makes those choices for you.
Yeah, it does, and that's kind of where tattooing led. Why? I already like tattoos. As a musician, I'm a heavy metal guy. Of course, I like tattoos. My best friends were tattooers, and that was what led to me getting in the business. And so that's what, and I never even thought that it was even going to go that way, because while I was friends with tattooers, I was trying to be a graphic designer, an art teacher, all this other stuff. And so, and then started having kids and stuff. And you even start wanting to sort of like prove to your kids that, these talents are worthy enough for pursuit as a means of supporting yourself and sustaining an income. Makes you feel good about yourself. You can do that sort of thing.
Sure.
And you will really never work so hard at anything else, though.
That's very true.
I mean, it's 24/7, and it doesn't stop. You might get some Sundays and a few hours here and there that you can put your feet up, but there's always someone to message back, and client that
well, I'm sure it helps that you're doing something you're passionate about and you love, and you're doing a good job of it. So, congratulations for carving out that path in life. Tell people where they can find you on the interwebs, where they can find the tattoo shop, where they can find the music and all that good stuff.
So haywoodarts.com is the website that's probably not been updated maybe since COVID or since the flood. We've been going through a kind of mini apocalypse in Whitesburg. We've had the COVID and all that, the shutdowns, and then as soon as we were coming out of that, we get the flood.
Yep.
How Appalachia managed to record an album and all that, and we got a record coming out. So it's like in December, we're hoping like an actual record. And how we managed to do that, and our tattoo shop got flooded. I had to tattoo all these different places. And I think I was going to tattoo Karen. Was that?
Yep.
Charmed Life in Lexington.
Yep.
And yeah, somehow we managed to do it. So, but so HaywoodArts.com, Instagram Haywood Arts. The tattoo shop is called the Parlor Room. Mm-hmm. Appalachitari is Appalachitari on Instagram, and on Facebook, all that stuff.
Well, we'll make sure that there are links to all those places in our show notes. And do yourself a favor, folks, go out there and download some Appalachitari, download some John Haywood, and if you're in the mood for a road trip, head to Whitesburg, Kentucky, and get yourself some ink from the man, the myth, the legend, John Haywood. John, thank you so much for spending some time with us, man.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. It was a real blast, and I swear it'll kind of wind down the evening. And
well, I'm proud to say you're the first fellow Morehead State grad that we've had on the show. Francesca's had a fellow Michigan State grad on the show before, but you're my first Eagle. So go ahead.
I was just thinking about all the Eagles that all my other buddies, all my Morehead buddies, that are out doing things these days.
I was going to say we could probably go through an all-star roster of Morehead, maybe not graduates, but at least Morehead students that have gone on to great success in the music world. So we're knocking them down one by one, and you were first. So thanks for coming on the show. All right, we're going to head to break now with one more tune from Upon My Word and Honor, which is available on iTunes and wherever you get your music from John Haywood. This is called Never Get Drunk Anymore. Nope, that wasn't it. This is called Never Get Drunk Anymore.
Okay, well, we're back. Thank you to John Haywood for such an entertaining and really, for me at least, thought-provoking interview. Yeah. His comparisons were fantastic. And like the last couple of guests seems like have been really deep philosophically, you know?
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that. But it was good. It was fun to talk to him. The heavy metal stuff was really cool. Yeah. And maybe one day I can actually play banjo like he does. So.
Maybe. I don't think I'll ever be able to do anything like he does, but I don't really have any talent. I can just talk. That's all I can know how to do.
Well, that's a talent. No,
yeah, I guess.
And a curse, blessing and a curse, which is a Drive-By Trucker song. But anyway, so what you've been listening to? I know you got some new merch, but what you've been listening to?
Yeah. I got a Southeastern hat from Karen. She got me that, and she said, I want to give you a early Christmas present. I just don't want to wait to give it to you. I'm like, oh, okay, fine, whatever. And she gave me the hat. I was like, oh, that's awesome. I love it. It's I'm anticipating all of my sports fan friends going, hey, what school's that from? You know, so it'll be fun to educate some people about that.
And for those listening who or watching who may not know the meaning of Southeastern.
Yes. That is the name of Jason Isbell's, I think it was his first album after Rehab. Mm-hmm. That was 13 years ago now. Is that right? Something like that?
Southeastern. Well, it was just an anniversary.
No, it was 2000. It was 2013. It just did its 10-year anniversary. That's right. Because you get the big double, triple album thing.
Right.
Yeah. So that was the one with Cover Me Up and several other fantastic songs. It was kind of his, big, critically acclaimed, Grammy-winning, album. So it's Southeastern. It's a hat for his album, obviously. Wunderbar. But yes, I got a hat, which is cool. And I've been listening to a lot of Jason Isbell lately, and I'm really kicking myself for not getting into him earlier in life, just because I've missed, a lot of his great years. I'm glad he's still kicking and still going and still making good music. But yeah. But speaking of, so John Haywood from Prestonsburg, Kentucky. Speaking of artists from Prestonsburg, Kentucky, I have been digging in a little deeper to Sunday Best, which you may have heard of. It's a duo. They're both from Prestonsburg. Nicholas Jamerson is one half of the duo, and I've been not only listening to a lot of his solo stuff, but I have been wearing out his PR team to try to get him on the show. I'm like, hey, tell him somebody from Pikeville wants to get him on the show. We're neighbors, by God. So, I've been trying to work the Eastern Kentucky angles to get him on. But he's in the middle of a solo tour, so he's very busy. And I get that. Yeah. So hopefully we'll have Nicholas Jamerson, maybe both of them, on the show at one point. But I've been digging into Sunday Best, and Sunday Best is playing at the Mercury Ballroom in Louisville in February, maybe. And I got tickets to that. So I'm going to go see him too. So that's good. Nice. And then the other Nicholas Jamerson, I might go see in December. I think he's playing at the Burl in Lexington, Kentucky, which if you've never seen a show at the Burl in Lexington, Kentucky, you should go. Okay. But great live music venue. So the Burl, and they do a lot of Americana acts there. Anyway, so Nicholas is playing a solo show in Lexington in December. He's doing 2 nights with Magnolia Boulevard. Magnolia Boulevard is a Lexington-based group. Fantastic. And I was introduced to them during the pandemic because one of my clients at the time was the CVB, the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Lexington. And visit Lex in order to kind of serve the community better during the pandemic when travel wasn't happening. They we helped them sort of flip it around and say, let's focus on supporting local businesses who are probably going to struggle because people can't go to restaurants, people can't go to live events. One of the things that we did was we took the Burl invited musicians in to play shows with obviously no audience, but they recorded them, and then Visit Lex would play those shows back on their Facebook feed to say, hey, here's a local artist. We're supporting the Burl and what they're doing. And Magnolia Boulevard was one of those groups. And I kind of got hooked on them then because their live set was great, even though there's no audience there because it was during COVID. But Nicholas Jamerson and Magnolia Boulevard are playing at the Burl in December. So I may go to that as well. So those are the things that I've been listening to. What about you?
Awesome. Geez, what have I been listening to? Nothing really like new or different or old that's new again, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know. However, I do have the opportunity to see S.G. Goodman tomorrow night in Chicago.
Wow. I'm going to see her a week from tomorrow.
Yeah.
When I get back from my big visit to the United Arab Emirates, the next day I'm going to see S.G. Goodman here in Louisville.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to be really tired, but I'm going to go see her play.
Seriously, the jet lag. Woo. Yeah, my friend Michelle, I've talked about her before. We went to the Nathan Graham record release. Mm-hmm. I went to see Coulter Wall with her. So she has an extra ticket and she asked if I wanted to go with her. And I do, but like that whole mom thing. So I got to figure that out first before I can commit to it. But I would really like to. I would like to see her in a smaller venue before we see her open for Tyler Childers at United Center next year. Yeah. So, I really want to go, but we'll see.
Well, then, Tom, you're always wanting to make the show. So Tom, you're making the show. Help her go to the SG Goodman, take the kids and go buy them ice cream or something. so she can go to the concert. Tom, you're on the show, Tom.
Seriously. That's not even the issue. It's, whatever. But he would do it anyway. And then, so not this coming weekend, but the following weekend is Nathan Graham's other record release party / show. And I may or may not have bought the ticket for that show at his last show after I'd had about 7 IPAs.
Oh, nice.
And I'm like, yeah, fuck it. I'm gonna buy a ticket and we're gonna go. And so I got a ticket.
Very nice. Hey, one other thing to throw out there for folks, just as a teaser, I saw on probably Instagram, maybe Facebook today, one of my favorite, what I consider roots music, which is, sort of they kind of cross genres. One of my favorite bands from the last 15 years that I don't think they ever made it really big. They were on Capitol Records. So they had a couple of, decent shots at a big album, and they had a couple of maybe top 40 songs. But there's a band out of Texas. I think they're out of Austin, Texas, called Green River Ordinance. And if you don't know GRO, they were together for 10 or 12 years and, had some modest success. And then they kind of, they didn't really break up. They just kind of, didn't do a tour. And I think COVID kind of messed with them a little bit. But I saw that today that they are in the studio and new music is coming from them in 2024. And I'm super excited about it. And the reason that I know who they are is years ago, I was at South by Southwest, and this was back when social media marketing geeks were important. And that's my only claim to fame, is for a little while, I was a social media marketing geek, and I was in that wave of we were important for a couple years. And so I actually was friends with someone who was in the marketing department at AT&T, and they were throwing a cocktail party event at a bar in Austin during South by Southwest. And my friend Chris said, hey, we've got a live band playing at our party, and they want me to introduce them, but I don't like being on stage in front of people. Will you do it for me? And I'm like, fuck yeah, I'll do it. That's wheelhouse for me. I love that shit. So it turns out the band was Green River Ordinance, and I had never really heard of them. I went backstage and introduced myself to them before the show and got to meet them all and all that kind of stuff. And I went out on stage and I introduced them. I think I said something like, I'm the godfather for all their children or something like that. It was just being goofy. And they got up and they blew the roof off the joint and blew me away. And I immediately went and downloaded everything they had put out at that point. And so I just think they're fantastic. They've got one of my favorite songs in the world. I love the song. It's called Dancing Shoes. Okay. So we'll put a link to that song in the show notes. Yeah, Green River Ordinance, new music coming next year. So I'm excited about that.
All right.
There you go.
I'll have to check them out. Yeah, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, good stuff. Dancing Shoes is is probably one of my top 5 favorite songs.
Of all
time.
From any.
Yep. I sing it to myself all the time. I love the song. Okay. It's even the song even references Emmylou Harris. Like it's just a great, just go listen. Dancing Shoes, Green River Ordinance. Go listen to it. They've got a bunch of other stuff too. They've got some good shit. So
awesome.
All right. Roots Music Ramblers, a production of Falls and Partners, copyright 2023. Our theme music is Sheepskin and Beeswax by Gentacorum. Join us online at rootsmusicrambler.com and make sure you mash that subscribe or follow button so you remember to join us for the next hoedown and throwdown. She's Frank.
He's Falls.
And whatever you do, kids, ramble on.